Today I'm going to show you how to make my favorite, and more importantly, Gordon Ramsay's favorite, sticky toffee pudding. Anytime I'm ever at one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants, this is how I end the night, with the sticky toffee pudding, and it's very easy to make. First thing, and most importantly, you need dates. These are pitted, but you can get pit-in dates and just pop them out. And now we're just going to cut these in half and put them into a nice little bit of a dice, because we're going to cook these down, so the smaller pieces you can get them, the easier that they'll cook down. They're very sticky, they're going to stick to your knife as you try to cut through them, so just be aware of that, be careful. Once you get those nice little pieces like that, we're going to throw these into a saucepan, throw those dates right in. That was 155 grams of dates as well. And now we're going to throw in 1 cup of water and bring this over to your stove. Bring this up to a boil. As it warms up, just kind of break those pieces apart. You don't want them stuck together. But right when they get to this point here, you're good to go. Let these sit now at that temperature for about 4 or 5 minutes. Really let that roll. You don't have to worry about overcooking these. And once they start to break down like that, you know you're good to go. We're going to blend these with a hand blender, but first we're going to add in half a tablespoon here of baking soda, and we are good to go. Grab your hand blender. If you want to transfer this to another dish so you don't scratch up your pan or your pot, that's totally fine, but just get that in there, and now try to get this as smooth as a paste as you can. You don't want any big chunks of dates, so move it around. It's going to bubble up a little bit right in the beginning, but as you can see, it starts to break down. One little tip that I like is to grab a spatula and kind of slide it all down towards one side so it's a little thicker of an area. That way when the hand blender gets put back in, there's a thicker amount of paste for it to cut through, and you can see it's going to really blend this much easier. But if you want to just throw this into a stand blender, that's also totally fine. Now just leave this off to the side for a little bit to let it cool down, and we're going to assemble the rest. So in a bowl, we're going to add 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. To that, we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and then we're going to also add in 3/4 teaspoon of sea salt. I do not have a 3/4 thing on me, so I'm just going to do 1/4 3 separate times, and that is the dry ingredients. I'm going to add a little bit of nutmeg to this as well, but you could totally omit that if you do not like nutmeg, and then mix that all together, and we're ready to move on to the wet ingredients. To a bowl, we're going to add 6 tablespoons of butter. This is salted. I like to use salted, but you could use unsalted if you want to control your salt content a little better. And then we're just going to mix that in a hand mixer for about 30 seconds just to kind of cream it a little bit. Add 3/4 cup of light brown sugar at that point, packed in real well. Bring that all together again. You really want to make sure this is well emulsified, not emulsified, but really brought together into a homogeneous unit. You don't want to see clumps of butter and clumps of sugar. Once you do that, we're going to start mixing in 2 eggs and 1 egg yolk, but we're going to do them one at a time. So there's the first egg. Once you get that nice and brought together, we're going to do another egg, get that all nice and brought together, and then we're going to throw in 1 more egg yolk, bring that all together, and it should be fairly homogeneous looking at this point. If you need some help scraping the sides down, just grab a spatula and you'll be good to go. And to this now, we're just going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. If you have vanilla paste or whole vanilla beans, even better, but just use whatever you have. It won't greatly impact the flavor, but you do want a little bit of that vanilla flavor to accompany the dates and all those other flavors that are in there together. And now we're going to give this one last mix before we move on to incorporating the dries into these. Before we add the flour mixture, we're going to get that cooled date mixture in, and then we're going to give that a little bit of a whip here also to make sure that's all brought together. If there's little tiny pieces of dates, that's totally fine. That'll just be some texture in your cake, not the end of the world. And now we're going to add the first half of the flour, and we're just going to mix that very gently. You don't want to overwork it. Make sure flour is not flying everywhere at this stage, but just bring it together nice and slowly until you start to see all that flour disappear, and you're left with just kind of a light brown mixture. Once you get to that point, you're ready to add the rest of your flour, and now just mix this together until you don't see any more flour. Very simple. You don't need to beat it too hard. You don't need to use the hand mixer. Just by hand here, very gently, and after a minute or two, it will all be gone, and you're left with that. It kind of looks like a very loose peanut butter, and that is your entire cake mixture. So now we're going to put this to the side, grab an 8x8 pan. If you have a 9x9, that's also totally fine, and we're just going to grease this up with some butter. Get every nook and cranny of this. You don't want it sticking. This will also help crisp the bottom and the sides of your cake, so just get that butter all over the place. You do not need to be careful or gentle. Everywhere, every little corner, rub it all over it, and then just pour that batter right in. I've seen other people cook these in 9x9s, and they get a little bit thinner of a cake. I don't own a 9x9, so this 8x8 is going to be totally fine. If you want to also cook these off in like smaller ramekins, that's totally fine. You might just need to adjust the cooking time. But once you get it into this 8x8 pan, Just smooth it out a little bit with your spatula and then give it a few taps just to get those air bubbles out. I'm also going to come in and just kind of wipe the sides down because those parts will kind of burn in the oven if you don't take care of those. But now we're going to throw this into the oven at 350 degrees for right around 35 minutes. Once that's in the oven, we need to now assemble our toffee sauce. So we have 1 cup of light brown sugar. We're going to add in half a cup of unsalted butter. This is salted again. It's right around another 6 or 8 tablespoons. Now we're going to add in some Lyle's Golden Syrup. This is about 80 milliliters or a third of a cup. This is a similar corn syrup type mixture. It's British. It's what Gordon uses. He would normally also use Lyle's Treacle Syrup. I just couldn't find that in time or get it. That's what most people would use. So we're going to use molasses instead. And this is just 2 tablespoons of molasses. And now we're going to bring this up to temperature and let this start to melt down. This will probably take 3 or 4 minutes. You don't really need to babysit this. It's not going to burn this early, but just give it a mix every once in a while to make sure stuff aren't sticking to the sides. And then once that butter and everything melts down and you start to see bubbles around the outside, you're going to let it reduce for about 2 or 3 minutes, nothing major, and then we're going to add in 1 cup of heavy cream. It's going to look like it's never going to come together and you're just going to have these 2 separate colors and mixtures in there. But after about 30 seconds, you're going to see this start to come together. I'll kind of show you it in real time here so you understand how weird it's going to look. It looks separated, it looks gross, but trust me, you can see it slowly start to lighten up and incorporate. Now what we're going to do is let this sit for about 15 or 20 minutes at around medium heat. It's going to bubble up. Mix it every once in a while. You don't want it to burn, but that's what it's going to look like. Just let it do its thing, and we're going to reduce this down by about half so it's a little bit thicker. And at that point, right before this is done being reduced, that cake should be ready. I'm going to test it with a toothpick. Use whatever you want, a cake tester. You could use a thermometer also. Nothing sticking, so we're going to put that off to the side, and that's where we're left with that toffee syrup. It's absolutely perfect. So I'm going to add a good amount of salt because you want that salty with that sweet. We're going to add a touch more of that vanilla. I like to add in about a tablespoon here's worth of honey as well, and then add in 1 more cup of heavy cream, and we are good to go. I turn that heat back on kind of low. You don't want it too hot at this point, but this will be your final sauce. So at this point, all you're going to do is get it to the consistency you want. Once that second cup of cream is fully incorporated, you have that beautiful light brown toffee colored sauce. Taste it at this point, see if you want to add anything, but now just let it sit off to the side, reducing until you get the consistency you are looking for. This trick I learned from Joshua Weissman. I had never done this prior, but he sticks a fork all the way through the full cake, and now we're going to pour some of that syrup onto it and let it soak in. I really like this because it helps keep your cake from being overly dry. I know some people don't like this word, but it keeps it very moist. So it is worth it. Pour it on. Use your spatula to make sure you're covering every little square inch. Let it soak in for a little bit. Now we're going to throw it back in the oven for another 5 minutes at 350 just to let that syrup toffee flavor really cook into the cake. And also it'll caramelize a little bit, which is really, really nice. Once we pull that out, we are done. I'm going to let this sit for maybe 3 minutes just so it's not scaldingly hot, but you can cut into this right away when it's hot. We're going to cut into just some little squares. Each one will be, about 2.5 inches. We're also going to top each piece with a nice little scoop of ice cream, so that'll take it to that extra level of decadence. But as you can see, it looks fantastic. It's hot. It's good to go. Gordon's, when I've gotten in his restaurants, it's been a little darker, so I do want to look into that discrepancy. Probably just use a little more date, but just top it now with a little more of that toffee sauce, and we're going to go for the ice cream. Some people use vanilla, but I thought, what better way to be decadent than butter pecan? And then just completely destroy it with a little more of that sauce. Get it messy. That's exactly what you want. I waited like 20 seconds, and you can see that ice cream's already melted all over the place, so you want to serve this right away. But this is fantastic. It's decadent. This will even last in your fridge for a couple of days, so just portion it off, heat it back up in the microwave. The sauce also reheats very easily and can be also used on so many other things. But this is truly one of those rare desserts that looks as good as it tastes. It is easy. It is worth your time. Definitely try this winter.